And also a story that you broke last night that our own Matt Matera reported on. Todd Bowles getting some help on game day with the clock management and the game management decisions, Greg.
Yeah, I was curious about that. I don't know that much about it. They have it on the website as a front office position, not a coaching position. Zach, I don't know if it's Beistline or Bestline, but got a hire from Jacksonville. Got a guy who'd been an analyst and kind of a stat hire in Jacksonville for like 12 years, but was their director of game management, was very much a guy in the booth in Jacksonville, kind of that, hey, probably should take a timeout here, probably should go for 2 here. All those kind
of what's a timeout? What is that, Greg?
Todd Bowles has taken a lot of grief for his first half timeouts and some of his end game decisions, if you will. So I think even if this is as much, this feels like somebody who's under Jackie Davidson as kind of an all around analyst and can do a lot of, hey, help us do a project and look at this and tell us what this could do to help us. I think he's kind of at everybody's disposal, but given that he's done this as a game management coach, I don't think they've had somebody with that listed as part of their duties really since like Cutter, I think, is the last really had that as the part of your job title. So I think it's smart. It's one of those where, again, just because someone's in Bowles' ear doesn't mean he's going to listen to that guy. Doesn't mean it's 40 years of coaching instinct for him or 30 years of coaching instinct for him. But I do think it's smart to have somebody like that who, again, if all he does is have a certain time in the game or a certain time when he can step in and go, hey, we might think about going for it here, and give him a hard number and say, hey, just so you know, it's percentages are about 6% better going for it here than nothing. And have somebody who can at least put that in his ear, so it's not just the default instincts of what he's done his entire coaching career. So no, neat to see that. And the Jags had brought in, obviously, in bringing in a new regime there. Kind of an opportunity to maybe get somebody that was cast aside or cut loose there in Jacksonville. But I thought it was neat to see. And again, I think anytime you see them specifically at a position, it's always neat to see that. I mean, it's in terms of just whatever his salary is to know that there's now room for that and appreciation for a need and more help on the coaching side and the front office.
Yeah. I was curious as well, like, is he going to be a front office person or a coach? But like even finding a bio on him was quite difficult because the Jaguars had already like erased it. The Bucs, it just says like his title. And that's about it. But it's fitting, right, that they got someone from the Jaguars after all of this saga with the Bucs and the Jaguars and Liam Cohen and Mike Greenberg doesn't take the interview. And then Robert Hainsey goes over there. So fitting that it stays with that timeline. But I mean, we could point to a lot of times last year where, like, I'd be sitting on the game day stream being like, timeout, Todd, timeout, Todd. Yeah. He refused to call him in the first half. And then I think it's not even just the timeouts, it's when to use them and when to call them. I mean, the Cowboys game where they scored too quickly and the Cowboys went at the end of the second quarter and kicked a 58-yard field goal. The Chiefs game, everybody knows about not going for 2 at the end. But I think we forget as well, Trey Palmer got the ball to the 1-yard line and they called a timeout with 33 seconds left and then scored on the next play. Yes, the Chiefs didn't end up scoring, but we all know how Mahomes and Kelsey and everybody can move down the field. It didn't hurt the Bucs in that specific situation. They ended up losing in overtime. But there's many points that you can look at during even last season. We can go back to Tom Brady's last year, that game in Cleveland with the overtime and everything that happened, or right before overtime. And it's clear. I still think there's a lot of good things about Todd Bowles, how he's able to keep the team together, how they've gone through adversity. I still believe in the defense, even though last year was certainly a down year by any means. But it seemed like decision-making, clock management is certainly a big area that needed improvement going into 2025.
Yeah, I felt like the other thing I think that works against Todd a little bit is that I'm always somebody where whether it works or doesn't work, I like being able to ask, if not post-game Monday morning when we get them, like, hey, just curious what the rationale was behind it.
Yeah.
And I feel like Todd, again, it's not a huge thing for or against a coach and a success, but I feel like Todd doesn't always have the most thorough, thought out answers to why. And I think part of that, I think Todd's probably more worried about sharing something he doesn't want to than he is giving us a full explanation. I think there's probably more he could say, but I think sometimes he doesn't help himself, and that his explanation is like, no, that doesn't really, that's not what.
Yeah, and now he can sit there and say, Greg, the guy in the box told me to do that, so that's what I did.
A better question for a guy you're never going to talk to,
right?
So yeah, no, it's and like you said, some of the more perilous decisions or non-decisions he made, like you said, didn't cost him, where there wasn't that like smoking gun. God, if you'd done this, really could have avoided that.
Yeah.
For the most part, there was times where it's like a wasted opportunity or 40 seconds he didn't have and they end up scoring anyway or something. So I think he dodged that. But again, I think in terms of, I think there are things that, especially, I mean, Todd's now one of the older coaches, head coach of the NFL. So I think it's an area for him where, again, he's not Pete Carroll, he's not Belichick, but I think he's been around long enough where it helps him to have young voices, challenging voices, just to put a bug in his ear that says, hey, just, I know you wouldn't normally do this, but the numbers say it's not a bad idea to, make this 2-down territory. It doesn't feel like it should be. It doesn't show up in your instinct and your motor memory as a coach to say, no, we should kind of go for it here. But numbers play out pretty well here, if you look at the time left. And I think, again, I have no idea how they're going to use this new guy, but I think it's just to have somebody in the building with that as a specific part of your job is a smart use of research.
I was told today that he's definitely going to be that guy on Sundays or on game days. Like, I got that confirmed, but it's, like what you're saying, he probably has some projects to do during the week, et cetera. He's not just, part-time hire. He's a full-time guy, and they'll find something for him to do when he's not up in the box assisting Todd. Greg, let me pick your brain on something here because, we saw this, and if you go back to, let's all get some recency bias here, right? Let's go back to that Commanders game. And when you look at Todd Bowles, he made the decision to kick the field goal and go for the tie there because he trusted his defense to get a stop, right? But really that logic doesn't really apply because and I understand like there is benefit to having a tie, like at least you're not trailing with 4 minutes and 41 seconds left. But he thought by getting the tie that his defense would be able to, in fact, stop the Commanders on that final drive. And they didn't, right? 4 minutes and 41 seconds off the clock, all the way down, kicked the field goal, the ball hit the goalpost and went in, much to the chagrin of Bucs fans and the team itself. But is that a situation, too, where this new hire can help Todd Bowles say, hey, we might want to go for it here because if you're going to trust your defense after a kickoff, like, let's trust them to defend 80 yards, and you're down 3 points. It's not like you need a touchdown to win. But to me, that was one of those moments, almost kind of like where Todd Bowles decided to go for the tie rather than 2 in Kansas City to potentially go ahead and win that game. It just seemed like that conservative play calling. And you know what? I take that back. I don't think it's conservative play calling. I think he trusts his defense too much. And I think that is kind of the poison pill in all of this is Todd Bowles' defense didn't force a punt the entire game, but for some reason, he thought on the final drive, the defense was going to finally do that, even though they were like 55% conversions, the Commanders were, on 3rd and 4th downs in that game. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I know that whole week, all I talked about with Jaden Daniels going to this game is that you didn't want to get into an end game situation with him because he's so good, even as a rookie. There's like 3 or 4 different games they won at the very end of the game. I mean, again, Hail Mary is one thing that's great. One in overtime, one to set up field goals late. I just felt like this wasn't a game that you wanted to have a 3-point lead in.
Right.
Or you wanted to be tied in at the end. And unfortunately, Bowles kind of painted himself into that corner where, again, I think the individual circumstance of what they were doing on offense and them having back-to-back flubs eats away at your confidence in a marginal situation. It makes you doubt your offense at the time where you need to have the most confidence to take a gamble. I say gamble. It's not a gamble. It's a choice.
Yeah, it's a choice.
I think we always think about offenses being active and defenses being passive. And like you see your defense out there like, hey, go win this game, right? And like, go do it. But it's really hope that the other team makes a mistake. Hope that, and again, what happens is if you have, again, rookie quarterback, you'd think, oh, that guy, unfortunately, Jaden Daniels is just unflappable in these moments and was there and did exactly what you shouldn't let him even have the opportunity to do. So, and that's not a hindsight thing. I think most people, when that happened, is like, oh, wow, okay. I mean, it's like, there's like a half dozen quarterbacks in the league where no matter when you score at the end of a half, like, oh, you left him too much time.
Right.
And 4 minutes and 41 seconds is definitely ample time for him to have it. And again, it's one of those where what Washington did so well was just not get off the field. And that's incorporating fourth down into your offense for sure.
Yeah.
And just being really good at moving the chains and keeping the ball. And it's paralyzing because you have it's like Baker Mayfield, getting the coin toss against the Chiefs, and you just kind of look up like it's
exactly. The head lead.
He's taken. I mean, again, that was your strong side. That's your dominant half, and they were on the sidelines for the last 5 minutes of a playoff game. So again, I'm sure we sit here, and if he does the opposite and he goes for it, and again, there's a botched snap or a play saying they'll go wrong. Well, oh gosh, your defense could have. You can second guess it the other way. I think Bowles' default as a coach, not to say conservative, but I just think his tendency is to choose the traditional path.
Yeah.
Again, he's a defensive coach. You want him to have confidence in his defense, even on a day where they really didn't do a lot to earn his trust and his confidence. 0
takeaways, didn't force a punt.
And I mean, that's part of the reason to listen to Bowles very consistently since the end of that game has talked about takeaways and the importance of
ball hawks.
That's what they have to do, ball hawks, because I mean there was a time that's what they did really well, and they've completely lost that.
That's right.